My name is Lindsay Bredner. I use pronouns they and them. I know what the understanding is, how we're trying to end racism or exclusion from in these types of community circles is if we have people like myself, we're trying to end stigma, but also with marginalized communities like the people of color and QTPOC, which I am with. I'm also in the Shades of Color support group as an Indigenous Two-Spirit, and I'm non-binary. I understand that's why our voices need to be heard. We should be prepared to call out and try to tell people our perspective so that therefore there's a better understanding that sometimes it can, some of us can have internalized racism, and that's what's happening, I guess, in our communities, where there's so much divisiveness, because we're never going to get rid of, I guess, the PTSD survivors. You can't ever say to the residential school survivors or the 60 Scoop survivors, oh, get over it, because you're going to always have to allow these safe spaces and hold the mic or pass the mic to them so that their voices are heard. I've had two close colleagues have negative experiences being parted. Not just a Kagan, but Mobilization, which is Calgary. It's the Elbow River. That's the Indigenous name, Calgary. So from that, they've also, some were in transition, which meant they were going through top surgery and it wasn't quite done. And also they were placed in non-segregation, is that how you say it? Non-segregation or something, where they were in the general population, and they unfortunately got a bad experience being incarcerated, and it was just because law enforcement didn't identify and they misgendered them and they dead named them. And that's one of the other issues. Misgender in jail. Yeah. Okay. And dead naming.
Sergeant Gary Willits. I'm the sergeant in charge of our hate crimes and violent extremism unit for the Edmonton Police Service. Anytime we're dealing with a matter here of racism, and we're asking community members to come forward and share their stories, and some of those communities represent marginalized communities. And with that, we recognize there's a lot of trauma and there are some PTSD. And I also know that for some of those communities that is triggered by the police. And that uniform is sometimes a trigger. And in all fairness to that community member, I'm glad they identified it. And it made us appreciate, maybe, and we're doing so many presentations, we forgot to outline and even notify the public that police would be there in uniform. So recognizing that, there was that learning, that perhaps we could have communicated that different, we had to look at the gains of staying versus leaving. And at that point, I felt it was better to support that community member and remove ourselves from the picture. I knew we would follow up. I knew that wasn't going to be closing any doors. And it was a great opportunity for us to revisit how we're dealing with situations and how we're working collaboratively. Because if somebody's not comfortable, that's the whole thing around safe spaces, creating that, and that's one of the goals we're striving for, is that open communication. So I was fine with it.
I would say as well, community accountability. The community's got to take more initiatives to get together and be that liaison. It's one thing to have a liaison officer, but the community then has got to take that information. So if I meet with you, David, you need to go back to your community to listen to what you message, and there's got to be that community involvement.
My name is Greg Mady. What brought me here is I'm always looking for ways to reach out to the community to combat hate and increase education on what's actually happening out there, and basically get all the facts that I can in order to make this fight over. I'm with the Edmonton and District Labour Council. We're a group of affiliated unions. We're about 4,000 Edmonton unionized workers here. And how it helps us, I mean, from our perspective, the ruling class seeks to divide people so that we fight against each other instead of fighting against the people who are oppressing us. And I see this as a way for us to continue that fight in order so we can eliminate that as a threat and focus on the real enemy in our society. Well, I mean, people need to know how the structure works. I got a feeling a lot of people aren't really familiar with policy and how people can behave. We all have a job to do, and understanding what that job is the first important step in order to kind of make any positive changes in our society.